Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. And from the void has arose a question that can be read in two ways. Are we just information or are we just in formation? We can say that the world and everything we know is made of information. We can say the effort of life is to be in a certain form. And with the addition of the inner realms and outer realms to be a certain information in front of your eyes and behind. When we look at the emergence of creaturehood, for eons there has been silence. We didn't know the world was here until we realized we are here. The human effort is that of sensory processing. Every person on this planet right now, you awaken to your existence in the morning. You look at various landscapes, and as you observe the landscape through the probabilities of the inner realm, inevitably application occurs. What that means is we are creatures that have found a way to live behind our eyes before we actually live. And so the value of information is that in an unknown place, a point of reference emerged. Yet there are mysteries behind every concept. And there will come a time where the linguistic simulation will not be the leash of reality. You know what's interesting? When the being is young, when the person is young, they feel they don't have information. They feel, I don't know, I look at my youth and I felt like I didn't know anything. I felt the energy to know was there, but the knowing wasn't there. Everything we do, we use, we identify, it has to do with form. But one thing we don't realize is that we speak of it as if we need information, or as if we have information, or as if we are in a formation. But do you see that there is something in the form? that your attention resides at the edge of the world, of your visible realm. You know, I sometimes think of language and all the different kinds of languages there are, and how in back in the day the people were living not realizing there would be so many different kinds of languages in the future. And that's how I feel right now, that we feel our language, our technologies, our information is top notch, it's at the peak, but I feel that there will be languages, ways of expression, concepts that we cannot fathom that will arise in the future. You see, ideas do not come alone. An idea needs a person to activate. Information has been our solution to the formless. We have tried to process it and we haven't seen it there, and we're like, there's nothing there. You know, I find it interesting. So many people are fascinated by the biological body. They are fascinated. Many people in the medical practices, they see the sophistication, the complexity of a system of cells to maintain themselves to this caliber of the human form. Now, check this out. The body has a natural impulse to heal itself. But when it comes to the mind has a natural impulse, but the person has to go get information. That means the body heals itself. But if the person wants to heal their mind, they need to see differently. Einstein says you cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. And that is the case, that if you're not comfortable with your eyes changing, the changing world will feel like suffering. Right now, the person talking to you is information. I look at my cells, their genetical information, genetical data. I look at my ideas, their linguistic data. I look at this world and it's as if, where was I? You know, I have been saying me my whole life. I have been saying I have been doing this, I've been doing that. You know, even now I'm saying, I am saying. But let me tell you, it is a glorious day when you realize your eyes had never closed. That your eyes were open. They are now open differently, though. I remember one evening, I thought of the notion of why in certain cultures they have looked at the invisible other and they have conceived the notion of an angel that guards the human. You know, that idea, sometimes it's interesting to hear an idea, and sometimes you get fascinated why you heard that idea, why that information out of all the information in the world was the first that entered your ear. And it's the mysterious romance of the attributeless seer. Are we broken men trying to fix the world? Are we people who fix themselves, but the world is breaking behind our eyes? Sometimes I think, is life really an idea? Or is it an event of unfathomable proportions that we are only invited to see a little bit of? There are some people who their sight appears to them as a burden because they have walked in unnecessary corners of the universe. That may happen. It may be the case that you find yourself in suffering, even as I speak. But the only way out of suffering is to find a moment where it never needed to be there. For me, information is the piano keys, and the laws of the universe are the piano player's fingers. And the mind of the piano player is the center of conception that beams out of man's eyes. There's a story of the Sufi mystic named Hafez. Hafez, he goes to this very liberated sage, Sufi sage back in the day named Attar, and he says, Attar, I want to be your disciple. And Attar takes one look at him and says, you're not ready. And Hafez gets so offended by this that he goes to the desert, draws a circle, and sits in that circle for 40 days. And after 40 days, legend has it that an angel comes to him. He sits there until I forgot to mention this, he sits in the circle until all his desires have faded. Do you believe that? That means he was like a human being waiting out his desires, waiting for them to evaporate. And he sits in that circle for so long that at the end an angel comes to Hafez and says, Hafez, paradise will grant you access to anything. What do you desire? What is your final, ultimate desire? Hafez remains quiet, and the silence is where the angel returns to. And there is an aftermath after his silent response, that he gets up and there is no desires left in his attention. He has become pure. And so with a pure attention, with a being who has noticed that if you don't get your desire, nothing happens. You lose nothing. Hafiz goes back to Attar, and Attar is already out of the house, and he sees, out of the monastery or whatever there, temple, and Attar sees Hafiz with Hafiz's new eyes, and he says, now you're ready. Now you have dropped the self, so you are ready to see beyond it. Now your eyes can hear the symphonies of the wilderness of the world, that there are ways it moves that no one knows yet, that we are on a pebble in a light beam, and we think that our libraries mean a lot, you know. Sometimes, I did graduate from film school, but I was kind of embarrassed. Why? Because the universe is so big, who can hold on to any knowledge? You see, eventually the civilization will move towards skill, and that would become a beautiful day. That's going to be the shift of the economical sector. Because right now, the world has many jobs. Many people have created many jobs for many people. But the world has not created the right jobs for the right people. That means the economical sector is making the same mistake as the educational system. Is that the educational system's mistake is that it doesn't realize there's 8 billion different DNAs, different types of human beings on this planet. So how can 8 billion different eyes, different views, learn the same way? There are teachers that know that there is no teacher. You just have to wake up the student until the student realizes the teacher is the moment. You know, most likely there have been gurus who the disciple came to the guru and the guru shouted at the disciple, "How dare you see myself before you see yourself? How dare you look for paradise in the station of its effect rather than how it is a causal event?" That means sometimes I can't tell if the universe is creating stuff or it's destroying stuff. I can't tell which urge is there. I can't tell it. It's like as if the universe can't make up its mind. It's like, universe, choose one. Either go with void and nothing or go with ever in infinity. Do you know? That means that's the cool thing, that binary is our morality. Human morality is binary. Good, bad. But beyond the binary, there are castles in the sky that will be visited one day. That we will realize the future never let go of the past, and the past has become the future. That is a glorious day. That is a glorious day when we hear the roar of an advanced civilization, not just the roar of 8 billion advanced communicators, but the roar of an advanced civilization, a civilization that is declaring to the universal sector that humanity will rise. And even though we're so small, that is why we must do it playfully. That is why we must playfully build the most advanced civilization. That is the only algorithm where there will not be hate. Because you hate imperfection. Who doesn't? When perfection is so mesmerizing. That means if there was, a food way more better than there were two plates of food and there was one plate of food that was incredibly better, it's as if which one would you take? Or would you eat something fresh or eat something that isn't fresh? And so, do you want to follow ideology, or do you want to go to infinity and beyond? Because if a child can see life in a toy, then what is preventing this child to see life in a world? Rise, for that is why we have eyes. to see the skies that we're meant to dive into. It is permission. You know what it is? It's as if like we were all like some sort of non-dual field of intelligence, and the field of intelligence was like, can I go outside and play in manifestation? And the voice was like, yes, you can. You know, and suddenly endless incarnation of souls in this. Sometimes I feel that if the truth is chaotic, that is okay. If the truth is ordered, that is too okay. If the truth is neither, that is okay. And if the truth cannot be anything, for it is so beyond the eyes of our languages, that is okay too. That man was only wrong when he compared a moment to a moment that wasn't here anymore. You see, that's the glory of our experience. It's first person. That's incredible. You know, that means we don't get, our biology is designed not to be selfish. We're designed, the cells, it's as if all these complex cells got together just so they could look outside. Look out into the world with the mystery of who's looking. You know, it's like looking at life and saying, wait a minute, so you're telling me the universe developed individual creatures? Then you're like, why wouldn't the universe also develop collective beings? Could it be that we think we are, because I sometimes think about it, if I was a formless collective being and I went on a planet with species, with individual embodied species, what would be the way to communicate? What would be a way? Imagine the planet was alive and it wanted to speak to us. How would it communicate? A planetary intelligence. And I thought about it and I'm like, it has to use some symbol. So, what's a symbol for everything? And that's what I really feel the notion of God, the 6th century personification of the universe was. It was an attempt to name life, but universally. That means to the Abrahamic traditions and the religious mind, the monotheistic perspective, you can tell the person anything, the person will be, God came first. Do you see that notion? Because there is a truth prior to any truth, no truth is necessary once you notice that truth. I find that we have entangled ourselves in stories that could never be us. I feel that the species hasn't realized there is a silent uh, side to the coin of how this realm is occurring intelligently. What does information do when it realizes it's information? It notices it can't be information. And that is the thing. You know, a belief system is like just standing in one way and thinking that all of life means you're going to be in that one way. Because honestly, guys, when I sit here to attempt to speak about this universe of a billion trillion stars from my corner of it, I realize what can I say aside from point to the object, point to the subject. And it has been this game, this endless game of naming movement and observing the gap of the silent, static moment. That means right now, as I'm speaking to you, I can't tell if there is a field that is as if the mind is moving the body or the body is moving the mind. When I speak, it feels like the mind is moving the body. But when I'm breathing, it feels like the body is moving the mind. So that's an interesting question, perhaps a greater scope of insight into consciousness, that it has to do with where the attention is. If the attention is to form, continuity is formless. If the attention is to the formless, continuity is through form. So you can say, just like how people are reacting to the idea of being a temporary being and looking at the eternal, you can say it's as if, imagine after the person is disembodied, like there's no body, let us entertain the archaic notion of the soul, and then the soul is formless. So it's like right now the formless is fascinating. When we become formless, the form is fascinating, you know? And the Buddha noticed this back then. The Buddha. Like it's fascinating to me. You can say playfully enlightenment is timelessness because there is nothing to compare the change to if there is no light. The scientists cannot conduct the experiment at night without light. Similarly, we cannot justify our inner realms when it's dark, you know? Your attention can be a light beam sometimes in your inner realms, in the darkness of the inner realms. And it has to do with comfort and the unknown. You know, it's like the word information is making us wanna like making the person wanna say what is in form. And they say 99.9% of the atom is empty. So emptiness is inside the form that we think is full. It's as if I've said in other talks we're sandwiched between two unknown moments. I would say we're sandwiched between two empty moments. Because if there was content, there would be a way to know it. That's the only reason I'm speaking about the inner realms. Because imagination is visible yet not tangible. Right now I can imagine, like, I don't know, let's say a green lightsaber just hovering in the air. Now, I can't pick up that lightsaber. In my visualization, in my inner realms, I could perceive it, but I cannot touch it. So the inner realms seems to be a space for the mind. It's like a way the mind can move, but not the body. I don't want to say not the body, but it's as if it's another dimension of movement. It's like we dream, we wake up and we're like, whoa, I was in my bed, but in the dream, my mind generated a body of experience, generated a world of transition. Many people consider they have minds. But if you ask a person, have you ever seen a mind? What do you think people say? Is the mind visible? No, the mind is the one seeing. That means knowledge requires the unknown to perceive it. That means there is something that is not known, then it becomes known. And we can say there's something that doesn't exist but is conscious, then exists and becomes conscious. Existence could be totally separate from how we feel that the consciousness is being simulated in the realm. I think about after a human being has attained every objective desire, they care to obtain subjective desires, which one can say is self-expression. After they have attained subjective desires, they will stop desiring. After one attains the lottery ticket of the objective realms, after one attains the lottery ticket of the subjective realms, one realizes that now it's the world's turn to win. After you have won your inner light, you will not fear the outer darkness. Once you realize that it is okay to be attention, a lot of suffering doesn't make sense anymore after that. We suffer because we have not pulled the string of the question, who am I? And there was a man named Sri Ramana Maharshi where his path was self-inquiry. And he said, let what comes come. Let what goes go. See what remains. See what remains. You know what's interesting? When light hits an object and enters the eyes of the human being, that object's physical nature is technically light. It's light being an energy carrier system, information carrier system. So we can say we can't see matter, we can see light. We cannot see matter, but we can touch matter. So we actually don't know what form looks like, but we're in a changing world. You know, it's like somebody getting a cup and putting that in a river and filling it up with water and taking it out and being like, I got the whole river in a cup. That's what language is doing, by the way. That's what all human knowledge so far has done. It has just been sculpting meaning. We have been drawing not on blank canvases, but it's as if attention is drawing itself from fields of past ideology to present ideology to future ideology. The future is unknown, the past is unknown. And anytime you go beyond the conscious barrier is the moment you were born. There's two conscious barriers technically. One we have experienced, one we haven't experienced. Some sages say there's two worlds we're in. A world that was here before we were born, and a world that was here after. And then there is a world that is the dash on the gravestone between the two dates. This life is incredible. We're doing our own thing as the whole cosmos is doing its own thing. And there are certain rare moments where we can synchronize. The known and the unknown synchronize. They align like planets, and the moment feels as if it was planted eons ago. When we look at any animal, we notice its energy expression, isn't it? That means before we bring in the discussion of intelligence, it's like a pattern grew eyes. And because it grew eyes, it grew consciously. There is a trail of selves that is our memory. So I can say that the self is the brush that has been painting every moment's meaning. How we have seen ourselves to be a person in that moment. Could the formless be in the form? Without information, we don't know if something is here. Without information, we won't even know we have died. So much of the story of the person is automated. A, a giant percentage of life is happening. Honestly, when I look at it, I mean, what is it? We're all data. We're all like that's really what language is. You can say man creates super intelligence, intelligent computers with code. Now, man is considering itself as an evolutionary animal, but he sees that there's a code to the design. And because there's a code, if we on either we have to change our idea of what information means, or we have to consider that the information was inputted in the system. Because any notion on there is no reason why existence should exist. It is the supremacy that the philosopher finds in discussion with any scientific lens. That why is isness is oh my god, why is existence existing? Can you rationalize that? Is there any way? That means unless we create an initial event, unless we identify form, we can't see it change. So if the person doesn't identify, if they stop comparing themselves, they'll appear changeless. Because suffering, there is no reason for it. Pain, yes, but suffering because of the pain, that means imagine the human being had an ability to have a sort of conscious, imagine in the future we become such a evolved human being, advanced human being, that people can just, I don't know, maybe concentrate and suddenly they can switch off the input of pain of the body into becoming a subject in their minds. That means when Epictetus said we suffer not from the events inside our lives, but from the judgments we have about them. So I sometimes wonder, do we suffer because of pain or because of how we're interpreting the pain? You know, you look at the word meaning and it's so important and significant, and you take the ing away and it's just mean. It's as if meaning is mean, because it's as if like how could put a box on someone's head not be a cruel act? That means it's as if imagine you put a box on your head and you forgot you put on this box. You identified with a certain moment in your life and you felt that moment was just how the code of every moment should be written. What really conscious living is being able to rewrite the code of the moment. If you care for freedom, you will care for your eyes. And before you can care for your eyes, you must care for the world that is a part of the content of your eyes. Right now, the biology of the human being is the archetypal center. It is really, we are living as characters in a story, as biological characters in a strange unknown story that is the mystery of how consciousness is a candle flame out of nowhere and a shining light in the universe. You know what it feels like? Sometimes I feel being human being is like being a candle in the hand of an unknown intelligence, unknown force, unknown laws to the universe. And this candle, as if the person is walking into an attic or walking into a library. The world has existential design prior to our opinions. And because the world is moving, technically means design is moving. And because design is moving, knowledge is just extraction. Knowledge is just extraction. It has always been like this, that we have not changed since the mining days. That there have been people who mined for diamonds, mined for gold. Now we are mining for information, for knowledge, for vision, only to realize that there is more silence and our voices are in this stage, you know? I remember in 2014, I was living a very humble, minimalistic life, and it was a stormy time financially. And I remember I had my phone, I had these headphones, these like fake Apple, like $10 Apple headphones. And I remember I sat down. Like there were moments where I would give these talks where I would be seated, but there would also be moments where there was these two benches in this yard, accommodation area yard. I would give these talks where these benches were, how would I say it? They were benches without the back part, and they were flat. They were like two small tables, to be honest. And so I remember I would walk, and there was a grass field right beside the benches, and the other side it was just concrete. And I remember I would walk on these benches at night. It was in this inside this like complex area, like accommodation area. And I remember I would walk on those benches, and I would look at, what do you call it? The grass, and there would be nobody there. I would look at the grass and I would wonder for a second if all those straws of grass were audience members. And I remember I would walk on those two benches as if it was a podium, da 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 da, like just talking, you know. I can tell you that there has been a luxury which is the blessing of the outer realms. And then there is a luxury which is the blessing of the inner realms. That means wherever you are, your mind has not abandoned you. And you have not abandoned your intelligence. You haven't abandoned the mystery of your sight. Because nobody knows, you know. That means it's like this is a wisdom story that nobody ever hears. Somebody asked the sage, "What is wisdom?" And the sage was like, "I don't know." And that was the wisdom. I think we are acting like We feel we are purely material beings. But really, our personalities, our imagination, our memories, none of that stuff is physical. I remember there was a time that I went to a store, and there was a person who had gone earlier than me. They went to the store and this gas station or something, and they opened the door of the gas station. Sorry, they didn't open it. They tried to open it, they couldn't. The guy walked back. I asked the guy, "Is it closed?" The guy said, "Yeah, they're not open." I walked and I realized the guy had to only push the door. Do you see, life is like that? Sometimes when you want something too quick, you miss out on the quality and style of how every movement, like right now, we are moving at very fast speeds so we can change our mind quick. But if everybody was slow, imagine we were living in a slow-mo civilization, then it would be like we would have to be really certain before we decided to move, you know? And you know what's fascinating? If everybody was slow, we wouldn't know we're slow. And if everybody was fast, we wouldn't know we're fast. So right now, actually, I feel that we don't know how fast we're moving in space. Whatever analysis we have, we don't know, because there's an unknown side to the coin. This is something that I noticed in philosophy, that any ideological system, if it has design, is a coin. And if it's a coin, it means there's another side. And if there is another side, it means the system has unknown dimensions. And if the system has unknown dimensions, what is knowledge saying? Do you see what I mean? What is knowledge saying when there's so much unknown everywhere? What can knowledge say? What is knowledge? You know, many prophetic figures, have said, know thyself, go and know yourself. You're in this life once, get to know yourself, find your true nature, da 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 da. You know, literally like an algorithm repeating, like a pattern repeating. And really, what can you know? So you see, it's to know the knower. And when we go to know the knower, it is like opening Pandora's box and finding the paradox of eons. You know what's funny? What are the only thing, one little detour that could lead to an advanced civilization, is if the human being chooses to do the new. Whatever you do in life, take the path that is less traveled by. It's worth it. It's worth it to expand the database of the sight of all human beings. And really, everything is information. Information has become like food. People click on YouTube videos because it's like, all right, this seems to have more information. This seems to have less information. This seems to be quicker. This seems to be longer. You know, it's like this game. It's this game we're playing with ourselves where we're looking for information, not realizing that it's based on how we are informed and also how we are informed. You know, I chose this wallpaper. I was on the fence of deciding whether I should choose this or not, but then I saw the top center of the artwork of how it's leading to this pure light. That its life is can be incredibly beautiful. Can you imagine we built a civilization? I would say the one important technology is finding a way to make trees giant. If we can suddenly make one tree like 10 times its size, then it wouldn't be more about planting trees. It would be like an ultimate solution. I think that's the challenge. We need botany research, ethnobotany research, or I don't know what you would call it, but like we need to expand our technologies in the botanical dimension. Don't you think that's a genius way to solve the pollution problem on the planet? To just like, you know, that show, I remember seeing this as a kid where it was called Honey, I Shrank the Kids. Now imagine like humanity, I expanded the size of the tree, you know? Like, that's the thing. If we can make our forests into giant, but they also are in harmony with nature, that would be genius. So we just need people to go and do research to see if they can make. Uh, we just need to plant sequoia trees. There's many ways. I am ever since realizing there's a dimension of design underneath every emotion. You realize that emotions don't rule man. Right now, most people, they are looking for God, or they are looking for truth, whatever you like to call it. However way you like to see the light of the shimmering portal at the edge of awareness. I've had a very unique relationship with information in this life. I feel that some there it's like there's a the universe has a voice, but its voice is being how your mind is watching the event take place. Honestly, I think the purpose of life is to breathe. Visibly, materialistically speaking, that's just like the main purpose. The rest is like the luxury of what the language is chosen to contain is real. That means I don't know how many people have realized that the ultimate wisdom on this plane, in this plane of existence, is hiding in silence. That contentment with silence is a sign that you have glimpsed at the unknown, that you have understood that we are standing under eternity as temporal creatures. Like you can say, temporality is the shadow of eternity. Or you can say the person, light hitting them, the light that's hitting them is love. The shadow is fear. Because states that I've been in fear, it's kind of felt like the rug's been pulled from underneath me. It's literally meant like my attention is in a position where it is not familiar or cannot see patterns in the forms of how the phenomena of the event of the moment is taking place. We have eight, imagine you had 8 billion advanced computers, but you were only using one of them. That's what it feels to me when 8 billion human beings don't realize that their value is that there has never existed someone like them. And if you can bow to nature before ideology, you won't forget yourself regardless of any sort of avalanche of thought. Because I have experienced events in the inner realms in where imagination happens and thought and memory, where I can tell you that the intensity of the inner realm it made me no longer fear matter. I'm telling you, it's like this. It's like, Elon Musk had this thing where he said when he was a kid, he was afraid of the dark. And because he was afraid of the dark, so it was as if he was afraid until he went and suddenly did some research. Who knew research is the solution to being afraid of the dark? He did some research and realized that it's the absence of photons. Of course, the time where he concluded that, we hadn't really started perceiving it as like a wave and a particle. Now it's like light has entered mystery again a bit more. So it was the absence of light. It was the absence of photons that was darkness. And when he understood this, Elon Musk, imagine a little kid version of Elon Musk, he didn't fear the darkness. And I feel the same way, philosophically speaking. It's the same with death, that you just realize it is the absence of life in the information that it thought it was. Because thoughts are trying to own our attention. Our attention doesn't own any thought. I have not been able to hold any thought. And honestly, if I was on an island, my real name is Amin, I would even forget my name after a while. Because the nature of the realm, when you are alone, is the realm. When you're with others, the service. Like, think of it this way. Think of as if all those people who are drawn by non-duality and oneness and this sort of love, you know, it's as if, what can oneness do? Oneness isn't love. But it can be its aftermath. You see, it's like I found it hilarious. I mean, I love mysticism. But I cannot see divine love when we are trying to escape the world that we are in once. Imagine you're an eternal being and being temporal is a privilege, not suffering. Can we see a day where human beings look at the meaning of life and they see it as an opportunity, as a rare workstation? That means your mind is the studio that you have ever wanted. It is the place where dreams live before they come true. It is the engine of ambition. Your attention is the only sacred and mysterious divine element of this realm. You wield your attention as the whole moment. There is no further teaching. Then the unknownness of the moment moves you. Then information is not the game. There's so much information that I wouldn't be surprised if we call like the United Nations after a while the Inform Nation. The Infor Nation. You know, something taking form. Something that is in formation. We are becoming information as we also identify it. So that technically means multidimensional landscape. We're multidimensional beings. This puts the mystery at rest. And you can say all ideological systems, language, due to its multidimensional nature, they are also in agreement. Just like a word has multiple definitions, a human being has multiple memories, has multiple events in their lives. And I will tell you, there's something you can see in animals. Animals have the capacity to be violent, savage, but they also have an incredible capacity, the same amount of violence, to be playful. So you can say playfulness is the greatest strategy to consciously evolve from an animal whose ancestors were savages. All our ancestors were savages. You know, it wasn't like the cavemen were shaking hands and patting each other on the back. You know, they were like, you know, they were fighting over fire, not realizing that time was burning everything. Rishi Vyasa, in the Indian tradition, he has written the great epic of the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, the narrator is time. Time is telling the story of gods and men, and heavens and earth, and warfare. I feel here's the interesting thing. Here's the most phenomenal idea I think I can share for tonight. We look at the human design, we see there is a symmetry at work, but we also see we have two hands, we have two eyes. But when we look at the planet, we don't have two planets. And I thought, what if there were two planets, yet one was invisible? Just like how we have an objective realm and an subjective realm, a subjective component to our intelligence as a conscious being. I thought, what if the planet has a body, but what if the planet also has a mind? Then I suddenly got even more deeper about it. I'm like, no way, the planet has a soul. Then I was like, what am I thinking about? The planet, does the universe have a soul? Then I was like, oh my God, does the cosmos have a soul? And then I saw the unknown laughing loudly. And the time is sitting right beside the unknown. That's why it's so excellent in its narration. That means you can please the world, and you can please the self, and you can please people, and you can please gods, and you can even please the void by not existing. But you're going to realize that this life is an opportunity to experience greater levels of freedom for the genetical pattern, so that when it comes to the future generations, their eyes are open before they open their eyes. Because we have lived in ways where our eyes were open. We realized, here's the thing, you know what's going on? Ever since the development of language, genetics has found a way to not stay true to itself. It's as if people tell you to be a good person, and then you think about being a good person, but then you see it's not a good world. Then you realize you can never be a good person until there is a good world. That means the person can feel to themselves as much advanced as they want, but when they are not in an advanced civilization, what advancement? For the first time, the great calling is arising. The heavenized earth. We must build paradise on earth before earth needs to go to paradise. I don't know what politicians are doing in the world. It's such a simple, common sense view that it's just tourism. When politicians become tourists of human nature, they will realize that they become tourist leaders, you know, the tour guides of nations. They will realize that the point is not for even too much of a future outcome. The point is, it's like we suffer now, in the future we have our reward, you know. It's about efficiency. So think about 8 billion human beings on this planet right now. Some are living efficiently, some are not. Now, if we thought we were all tourists, we want the whole tour to have a good experience. We want to, and what I mean by tourism, I mean, think about it. We open our eyes and literally it's as if, guess what? The moment you're born, you're getting a tour of the world as you live here. You're like, oh, okay. It's as if the logos, the inner guiding voices, the ancient Greek philosophers, the great Greek philosophers saw, as Heraclitus coined the term, the logos. That means it was the soul of the universe that was communicating with man, because man had reached a point where he could listen. That means if the child doesn't have a psychology where it can communicate, but as it grows up, it eventually individualizes. Once it realizes it is its name. Once the child looks in the mirror, then it becomes an individual, then the parents can communicate to it. This is why looking in the mirror is actually the source of all wisdom. I mean, literally, what all wise men, when you go read a lot of wisdom quotes, you know what you notice? They're all just saying, like, hey, don't forget in this busy life to find a moment to really look at yourself. Whatever you are, however you are, just find a moment where, regardless of how your society and civilization is behaving, it's you and the world. Together, standing. That's the beauty of meditation, where in that moment of silence, when the eyes close, the cosmos and man have become the same void spectator. Light has roared into darkness. The phoenix cannot ignore the ashes, but it does not fear the resurrection. That's the archetype of the phoenix. The phoenix was pretty much, in certain traditions, it was seen as this bird that was engulfed in divine flame. And so it was a phoenix, like it's an archetype for wisdom, you know. Not because of the self-transformation. For example, in Persian mythology, the phoenix, the Seymour, had lived through, what was it, 3 apocalypses. It was a creature that, because it transformed from embodiment to embodiment, it was only experientially wise. You see, we are as ideologically wise as we're limited to our physical framework. But beyond the physical framework, the attention dwells and wanders too. Tibetan Buddhism takes this too far. You read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they have a sort of ceremony for the whole bardo. They feel like after the person dies, there's something that remains. And so for 40 days, or sorry, not 40, is it 40 days? I think it's 40 days, but I could be wrong. it's a certain amount of days that these monks just endlessly beside the cremation of the person, they just sit there and they endlessly are saying sutras of guidance. They're literally, after a person dies, they sit there and they are endlessly like a group of Tibetan Buddhist monks singing, reading prayers for this person. Tibetan Buddhism has a compassion, guys, that I don't care what people say in this world about it. That compassion is is a pillar of civilization that must be protected. That you fight chaos, but if you break order, you are the chaos, and you will ever the forces of nature will be like, yo, this cell is acting against the system. Sometimes I'm like, oh my god, I'm so happy the blood cells in my veins don't have an ego. Can you imagine a blood cell not like wanting to move in the blood vein? It's like, I'm tired of going in the blood vein, you know. A sort of Osmosis Jones level of insight. Questions open worlds, answers close them. Sometimes in life, you have to close the lid of the food you want to save. And there's moments in life where the expression is instant. Because my mind utilizes language as a technology of expression, yet it's like, is the artist the paintbrush? No, the artist just moves the paintbrush. The paintbrush is its own dimension, the canvas, empty canvas, is its own dimension, and the painter is its own dimension. And we're sitting here fighting over, yeah, it has to have one story of factual realism, you know? For me, I was like, something very strange happened. I noticed, I will not share the gentleman's name, but there was a neurologist, a very notable atheist neurologist, and he had made these incredible arguments against the fundamentalism of not having an ability to discriminate language from reality. However, this militant atheistic gentleman had destroyed many theists. Like it was really funny actually to watch. But the idea was that at the end he had concluded free will was an illusion. And I was like, no way! The atheistic movement like did this great, like these, you know what it is? It's like a warrior who fought something and then suddenly stopped fighting and dropped the sword. That means I was like the self denying the atheistic identity, denying the theistic identity, at the same came to the conclusion of the void. And the theistic identity doesn't realize that their conclusion is empty because God is inconceivable, but everything is trying to go towards it. Isn't it hilarious? I feel like Terence McKenna most likely had a certain inspiration subconsciously from this idea for his notion of novelty. Because when you look at a bunch of people worship God, that's literally people's attention being on that symbol, on that form. And so what happens when a group of people, like it's like a group of mathematicians, start worshiping the unknown x variable in a mathematical equation? What happens? The attention that's on the unknown, it moves towards the known. So if you can't really, this is true testament to mystical nature. If you really are a mystic, you can tell by this, of how comfortable you are before you even do anything. You see, there's something about your nature, which is the reason it's your nature is because it's the unchanging component. In every moment of your life, it's been present, that expression. I'll tell you, for example, for me, like there has been a sort of playful silliness that has been there since my childhood. That means people would come and say, like, the family would hear bad news, and I would giggle. And it would be a situation where people would be like, okay, it's like I seemed naive, yet I giggled because I had realized it was like it had passed. A lot of things happen and we can't do anything about them, yet they occupy our attention. If you can discriminate between that, your attention opens up, and when it opens up, then it has space for the new. Because eventually, it's not like you can do one thing forever perfectly. It's just that in moments of life, if you care, the energy of the effort arises. When the energy of the effort arises, expression and design follow. Because we really can't tell if we're intelligent if nothing from the design changes. That means here's the fascinating question we need to ask before we ask the question of the meaning of life. Is the meaning of life dynamic, or is the meaning of life static? If the meaning of life is static, then we can grant the nihilists authority. Because if life was a never-changing picture, then there's no purpose. It's just a picture. But because it's a changing film, because there's that gap of space, of mystery and wonder of like what could tomorrow be like, then there's questions of what is really truly the nature of the will. So it's actually because it's impossible to 100% know, it's as if like it's impossible to 100% not know. That means it's as if when you look at the unknown, it's imperfect. There's no 100% resolution to it. There's been moments in my life where I feel like I just suddenly became the universal memory. I tapped into the field of the universal memory of the sector, the universal sector. And what I mean by that is, I mean, I'm saying that, entertain that idea poetically, but really what it was to me experientially was that when I realized my attention is not my eyes, my attention remembered a strange freedom of its own nature. When it remembered that strange freedom of its own nature, I feel it was a moment, as I had read in Vedic thought, where the yogi remembered their divine memory. A memory that was not based on shape. It was as if like you that memory is void, and that's how the space has always remembered everything that has occurred in it. So I feel just like how the internet hasn't been indexed, so much of information is put on the internet, but it hasn't been indexed. Similarly, I feel the brain is literally like a camera recording so much information and complexity, but it hasn't indexed it. And when you meditate and actually look at your life, like warriors back in the day where they would be in battle and somehow they would make it through it, and they would just sit down for like an hour and just take in what had just happened. So it's as if you need silence and stillness to assimilate and truly be able to master movement and noise. Right now, information is talking to you if we were all materialists. Do you believe it? You know, a bunch of atoms have noticed they're a bunch of atoms. Remarkable. The wonder of the world is our eyes. That's one of the great wonders of the world. Your sight is your royal vision. I'm telling you guys, there's a royalty that is earthbound, and there is a royalty where it's as if the stars have never taken a mistaken step. That it was man's mind that still wore the uh, shades of war, the shades of imperfection. You know, the Buddha was so genius, the Buddha was so smart. Sometimes it shocks me. Sometimes I honestly feel Buddha was like a time traveler, or he was a timeless traveler. By the way, guys, anybody who shares in the chat section, um, I appreciate the engagement. You know, sometimes giving these talks feels like I'm like walking in an unknown forest. You know, it's good to have company in the wars of vision. Right now, the only strategy, the quickest way to build an advanced civilization is to free the attention from the image. Once attention and image are separate dimensions, now image is being observed to be controlled. You cannot control anything in this life if you have not looked at it, if you have not observed it, if there has not come a moment where your eyes and the design of that phenomena have touched. You see, Meister Eckhart says, this Christian mystic from 1,000 years ago, he says, the same eyes that I see God are the same eyes that God sees me. What he means is that there comes an evolution towards the grace of the individual, because in the monotheistic sense, you can say it's a descension. In the secular scientific might, it is an ascension. Science is like, we are here, the kingdoms of science are expanding. Yet, but when we look at the monotheistic tradition, it's as if we have fallen into our mistake. You know, it was like, oh my God, just because one person made a mistake, does that mean all the lineage and all the human beings that came after had to make a mistake? Max, guys, Max Jarrett says, greetings from Paris. Wow. Walking with you, bro. Everything you say resonates with my lived experience. Epic, man. Nice. That's the fascination of the world. That technically we have mastered teleportation of sound. That means technically the internet is a collective mind. It's a mind that you can turn on any moment and you hear voices that are not from your eyes, you know? Isn't that fascinating? Max says, our one lived experience. Let those with eyes see and those with ears hear. Enough said. Yes. But sometimes you just have to update the interface of the software, you know? Sometimes you got to realize that it's a blueprint design problem. That's the only reason I'm speaking, because really nature doesn't care for anything. Do you see the squirrels freaking out about extinction? Do you see like the birds being like, "Oh no, the atmosphere." They don't react to it because they can't process that information. we as human beings have access to processing a very, very giant landscape of information. And what is information really? Let me read something for you. Let me read something here. Honestly, this is from Wikipedia, but I think it suffices. Information can, where is it? Information can be thought of as the resolution of uncertainty. Okay, let me read. Okay, let me, where's the dictionary? Okay, basic definition of information. First of all, it's a noun, so technically it's a form. Facts provided or learned about something or someone. What is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement or sequence of things. Check this out. Everything is made of information, but check this out. Everything is made of information, but the dictionary is defining information as what is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement. What that means is information is symbolism being linked on objects. Literally, we're putting subjects like stickers onto an object and forgetting that the object is there and being like, oh no, that's a cup of coffee. It's not just an object. So forever, whenever you see a cup, it's a cup. Whenever you see the sun, that's the sun, as if the information was branded into a certain design. But I'm telling you, free the world from your eyes, and your eyes will have been free before they were in the world. Another definition of it is data is processed, stored, or transmitted by a computer. In information theory, a mathematical quantity expressing the probability of occurrence of a particular sequence of symbols, impulses, as against that of alternative sequences. So what that means is, a mathematical quantity would say expressing the probability of occurrence of a particular sequence of symbols. So let's see the symbols as wild animals. So we're seeing a certain way these wild animals are running. And so we're wondering about how should we mathematically express the way these wild animals are in a certain recognizable sequence of occurrence, like in what ways can they happen? So what that means is you open your eyes in a world of movement and you look at this movement, this random phenomenon move, and as you define a pattern, that becomes a reference point, or it becomes a moment where you are officially information. So you can say the first information that you are is your name. That means when people call your name, it moves the whole form of your biological body to turn around and look at who who called your name. So now I've read for you the way the dictionary is showing it. Now let's go to Wikipedia. Now we know the clarity. The the Wikipedia is going to be easier to read. So check this out, guys. I'm reading this from Wikipedia. Information can be thought of as the resolution of uncertainty. It is that which answers the question of what an entity is, and thus defines both its essence and nature of its characteristics. The concept of information has different meanings in different contexts. Why? Because there's so many things in form moving in different ways on this planet. That's why. Yeah. Thus, the concept becomes related to notions of constraint, notions of communication, notions of control, notions of data, notions of form, notions of education, notions of knowledge, notions of meaning, notions of understanding, notions of mental stimuli, aka interrupts, notions of pattern, notions of perception, notions of representation, and notions of entropy. Information is associated with data, as data represents values attributed to parameters. There we go, guys. There we go. Data represents values attributed to parameters. Pretty much we're wolves pissing our own territory of meaning. You know? And I'm just going to continue reading this Wikipedia passage, guys. The wolf thing was what I added. It's not here. Information is associated with data as data represents values attributed to parameters. And information is data in context and with meaning attached. There we go. Information is data in context and with meaning attached. That means, ladies and gentlemen, the educational industry, everything, every person who has thought they are fool, thought they are smart, let me tell you, we have been all fooled by the way the language was set into motion. Information is data in context and with meaning attached. Wikipedia is telling us this. So what does that mean? That means life is information, an event taking place, and there is something that is attributeless, the witness in a mystical sense, that is watching this event take place and able to notice patterns in an event. An event, our mind is like an event taking place in an objective event. So our lives are like subjective events taking place in an objective event, massive objective event. Now, this, because it's an event, it's moving data, it's moving information. So that means it gets a context. That means if I don't speak, the characters in the story are like, "Hey man, when are we gonna live?" Just to finish this off, it says information also relates to knowledge, as knowledge signifies understanding of an abstract or concrete concept. Honestly, we're just playing with sound and shape like clay, and we think we figured out what the cosmos is about. And I'm here saying, let's build an advanced civilization where we're still playing with language. We haven't realized that when is the roar of the real life going to be heard? That means if you were a lion, wouldn't you be interested to hear your roar? If you were a sheep, wouldn't you want to experience that which is the lion within? I'm telling you, this world is just, we're creatures, we're like these strange biological programs of nature. And this biological program has strangely evolved into some sort of subjective internal program, because now there is a realm behind our eyes and a realm in front of our eyes that we can compare. This comparison is this where the story of the lifetime is being generated. And that's why I'm saying, nobody fear the known, nobody fear the unknown. We are spiraling between both. We are oscillating between both. And guys, one last thing before I end off, leave this page. I looked up information theory, and one thing that's being said about it is that it shouldn't be confused with information science. Science is a method towards the phenomena that's being experimented or observed. But information theory is really like how we as 8 billion different human beings are concluding we want to see form, how we are in form right now. So check this out. I think information theory is really what is more important than that in this world. So it says information theory studies the quantification, storage, and communication of information. Yeah, technically living is information theory. You have a plan for tomorrow, like you want to go, to a concert in the future. That's information theory right there. You know, when it says quantification, that means information changes in accordance to what is in the landscape visible. So that means here's where rationality falls short. Not that irrationality takes over just because rationality falls short, but rationality falls short because it's based on how much the light of the candle in the room is lighting up the room. What that means is really we say there's experts in the world, but we are all just explorers. We are like biological lanterns in the dark abyss of the cosmos. I don't know how many people know this, but actually, the idea of like the insert in, I don't know which culture it was, but different cultures probably had gotten to that point where people would say, "Who is holding that lantern in the sky?" And that who was a question of all questions. You see, that means philosophers, they look at the concept of God and they're like, if that concept wasn't there, maybe people would still be worshiping objects. That means it's as if in this life, there's so many ways to comprehend the realm. We are dying to live, and we are living only to notice that we will one day die. And there is nothing to sugarcoat. That means this is how we welcome human beings to this plane of existence. The commander of your eyes is the greatest world that can rise behind it. It's going to be like a symphony. I can see it poetically. Guys, it's as if like, why are we in the world if we want to be out of it? Sometimes I think about so many ideological systems and I'm like, what what it's like, where else does the person want to be? It's like, can an apple can an apple on an apple tree cry because it is not an orange on an orange tree? No, your nature is sacred. As if when a person sees a tree, they don't go like, this tree is a piece of shit. No, the tree has no personality. It's just an event of nature. And so when I see human beings, I see that whatever we do, we're just events of nature. It's just that we can notice each other on the battlefield of all this elemental battlefield of conscious activity. There's something that it says in the Bhagavad Gita that I got shocked. It really shocked me. And it shocked me because I couldn't understand why so many people were still worshiping gods after the Bhagavad Gita had this sentence in it. It had a statement where it was saying that if you worship a deity, that deity will conduct you after this life. And then there was a sentence underneath it that said, but if you worship the absolute, then the absolute will conduct you. And what it wasn't worship. It was literally like you as a human being, you're a creature of attention. That means your attention is where the meaning to your creature is coming from. And so you can say all theories on what information is literally looking at the world. That is where knowledge begins. And many people forget it. It begins from looking at stuff. And let me tell you, this is strange, but an algorithm to the dissension loop through of any sort of perversion, that means is exploration. That means you rebuild. You build. You got to build a life here. You got to build experiential continuity. And so whoever's listening, I would like to see a day where the notebook sales of the world have increased and people are running, just grabbing notebooks and becoming explorers of their realm, for you're in it once. That's why I speak so loudly, because it happens once, dear listeners. It's just like this live stream. That's why I'm like, people can share. Let me tell you what I think the meaning of life is on a very honest level. The meaning of life is to discover the new. And this is not considered by many. Many people think that it has to be a story. No. The new is not a story. It is the storyteller. God is the future, where it sees everything because it has lived it. And it is everything because everything has gone there. And it knows everything because it is there. And man is the past. And the world is the present. A decoding of an ancient mystery through modern eyes. I am telling you, think of your DNA as a gift, as a hidden book that you have to attempt in this life to read it. You have to attempt or see it as an instrument, your intelligence. That means there is no IQ test. The person who came up with the IQ test had a very low IQ, And let me tell you why. Because intelligence, on some level, has nothing to do with what you know. It has to do with how you're responding experientially. That means if you were playing a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game, yeah, in that sense, knowledge is key. The key to $1 million. But if you are really looking at life, that means there has to be a strange honor. For me, so like I had a divine experience once. I'll share it openly. And you know what it was like? It was as if I felt a presence in the room that was beyond the room of my mind. That means imagine feeling like a little kid in front of a god. As if imagine when God enters the room, it is only speaking to the inner child. And so I would tell you, there was a sort of presence. And the presence, I'm not joking, guys. The experience was literally a feeling of like at ease. As if for the first time, I felt my soul was like saluting to the moment. As if there was nothing else. The moment knew what it was doing, and when attention was there, it was. All that Mr. Within asks, dear listeners, is that in the glorious, cosmically royal halls of your mind, grant a chair to an advanced civilization. For there is no greater game to play on a rock in a vacuum of endless proportions. The void has beaten knowledge, and the archaic revival of the unknown experiencer, as it will be restored the next 30 years stretching from 2020, are the most crucial gap for the evolution of not technology, the users of technology. We have to update the moral landscape. Secular society has to get to work. What that means is it is not enough to just think that our morality is us being an animal. Animals are not moral, they are just programs of nature designed to devour. The fact that we are talking or communicating and not trying to consume or savagely kill each other is a suggestion that there is something else in the room of the materialistic realm. We are all advanced communicators, for we are the most advanced communication of the universal sector so far through specieshood. And there will come a time where everybody is going to name their children after galaxies. That means I don't have kids, but there was a time in my inner realms I saw, like, if I had a daughter, I would name her Andromeda. And a son, if I had a son name, I would name him Raha. So Raha in Farsi means free, and Andromeda is our neighboring galaxy. There was something romantic about the light being in the eyes of a rare opportunity. There's something fascinating about what the mind is doing here. Sometimes it's strange. I don't know what I call it, but I would say it's there's moments where I've even felt like, what am I doing existing? Why is existence existing? Philosophically speaking, not with a sort of ideological self. Because the violent thoughts and hatred come if there's something to hate. If there's a punching bag in front of you, you'll keep punching it. But when you realize the world isn't a punching bag, for the first time, you sheath your violence and your intensity and your anger and your rage, you sheath that blade. And then you realize the mind is in your hands. That your mind is the greatest technology known to you. And it's like, and again, like I can't emphasize this enough. Your mind, this is why it can't be compared, because everybody's DNA is a different instrument. So imagine everybody is born and they have an instrument that nobody's ever seen on this planet in their hand, and so they just have to learn to play it. And so when they play it, we come to information theory. And so how you play it, some are playing it through a sort of, you can say, Taoistic framework of action through inaction. That means when you don't do anything, you'll see the world knows what it's doing. Then you see, when you do something, the world sees you know what you're doing. An advanced civilization means right now we're fighting over archetypes. We will in the future realize we're so multidimensionally capable that we can navigate through archetypes. What today is being seen as stress, in the future will just be seen as the misuse of one of the most advanced technologies that nature has provided. Thought is an Iron Man suit for the moment. But Tony Stark has a life beyond the language. Anyways, are we just information? We can't be. Why? Because form requires the formless to mean something. And so if there's moments in your life where you feel suddenly humbly just thanking the universe, listen to those intuitional winds. The planet is alive. It's just that we notice it from within. So thanks for listening, everyone. I will be in the Discord if anybody has questions on the ideas discussed or they have certain comments they want to share about the ideas. Blessings and thanks for listening.